everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. And Happy New Year. I only have a few more days to say that, right, Wendy?
That's it. You get the cutoff, 31st.
Well, you are one of the happy points of my new year. Wendy F. Adams, CFRE, CEO of Cultivate for Good. And I would say, more importantly, one of the intrepid co-hosts of the Nonprofit Show. And so we did something different this year. We invited our co-hosts to come on and kind of give us their crystal ball, predictions and what they thought going forward we should be looking towards and for and to think about. And so this has really been fun. And you're in that rotation and you're talking about the power of people and progress, which is going to be really an interesting thing to get into. And so I'm just delighted that I get to have you all to myself on the Nonprofit Show to explore some of these things. You're one of the wise voices, in our sector and in my life. And I just love any and all opportunities I get to learn from you and to be a part of your world. We have amazing presenting sponsors that are a part of our world. They include Bloomerang American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Fundraisers Friday, Your Part-Time Controller, Third Sector Company, and Clear Impact. Again, our co-hosts are amazing. I'm Julia C. Patrick, but more importantly, Wendy F. Adams, CFRE, Cultivate for Good, is here with us today as we get her to shine up that crystal ball so that we can really learn from her perspective what's going on. But before we get into that, talk to me about what Cultivate for Good does and what you do in our sector, Wendy.
Well, we're going to talk about people today. And that's what Cultivate for Good is all about, is making sure that we're bringing our best to the table. We're all leaders, right? Whether leadership or a leader is in your title. And so what Cultivate for Good does is to make sure that the people who are making the movement are actually aligned with the mission, that they're the healthiest that they can be to bring their best to the table so that mission can move forward and that we don't end up in that, what we call the drift, or just so frustrated that we're floating. We're floating and we're floating onto other places, but let me not get ahead. So that is Cultivate for Good.
It's so interesting. I wonder if we had jumped back in the time machine and going back, if we would have had these conversations, because, as our labor market has shifted and tightened up, we're all of a sudden, sadly, worried about the health of our employees and their mental health and supporting them, where before, and I'm thinking about myself in my own life, you were told, hey, sister, if you don't do the work, you can't cut it. There are 15 other younger, cheaper gals in the back lined up that'll take your job. So buck up and do it. And, it's so fascinating for me to see this trajectory. Back then was not the right path.
It certainly was not. Suck it up, buttercup is not the answer. And we know in just our last 5 years how the change in the workforce across our sector and just the workforce in general, I don't have to do that. And I want to bring my best to the table. I need my employer to want that for me too.
Yeah. I love that you said it that way, because it's not a wish. It's a demand. We need to have this mindset.
We do.
For the health of our organizations, not just our employees, but it actually speaks to the way we manage and the way we lead and the way we sustain our organizations. And so for a lot of managers and leaders, it's a bitter pill to swallow.
It is. And they're grabbing at straws and how do I do this? And I think one of those key pieces is, are you listening? Are you opening those dialogue for conversation, and are you listening? And then for the employee, you got onus too. Are you speaking out, speaking up, telling your real story? Don't say fine, feelings inside, not expressed when it's not.
Right. I love it. Well, I think this is such an interesting time. And so let's start off with, speaking of mindset, one of the things that's in your crystal ball, first and foremost, in so many ways, is that retention versus acquisition. Holy moly, big topic.
Well, and you and I jump in and we've talked about this and we've had conversations with those who really are moving the needle and speaking into how much turnover plays a part in what we're doing. You said it back in the day, it was how many more people are waiting behind to take your space if you can't? Well, that's not the case anymore. And we're really taking a look at the cost. We love to throw out ROI. There's a huge cost. 19% in the nonprofit. That's what the turnover rate that we're seeing that's happening, right? Then we've got to take a look at how much did it cost to bring that person on? And it's about 50% of an individual's salary when we have to start all over again to acquire, to put that ad out, to get that word out that we have a need, and then get people trained and the loss of productivity in that space. So if we're not really looking at truly the numbers and that people are what are driving those numbers, well, I mean, accounting isn't happy, development isn't happy, and most importantly, those that we serve are who are losing out. So,
right. Wendy, it's fascinating that you brought up those two numbers, and I'm just stunned because we don't talk about that. We talk about, oh, we don't have the talent, we don't have somebody sitting in the chair or logging into the Slack account, but to actually like step back and say this is a real cost.
Yes. I mean, we're looking at costs in other ways. We're saying we can't afford to bring somebody. You can't afford to not have the right person in place and train them and support them. And again, getting down the road now that you have. So how do you retain that great talent that you just brought on so you don't have to start all over again? There is a cost there, but I don't think we're doing, the math is not mathing. We're not doing the correct math to say the spend that has to happen to retain quality staffing who are going to go and work the mission and move it forward. That is something that cannot be, we can't put it aside. We can't do it, look at it as an afterthought. We have to constantly have that in a proactive forefront space in our minds as leaders in the organization who are making those decisions. And I'm going to go there as board members who are looking at that budget, looking at that P&L and saying, well, why are we spending here? Or you've got to pour into your people. They have to know beyond what drops in every 2 weeks or once a month into that checking account that they matter.
Right. How do we know when it's working? And I mentioned this to you in the green room, though I was going to push you a little bit on this. Like, how do we know if, can we be measuring these numbers, these two specific costs and the retention percentage as it's going on? Or, how do we look at this?
Well, I think it's having the conversation. I say the same thing. It's like asking the questions. Are you having the dialogue with your team, with your staff, as far as, again, not of their career development, that they're feeling confident in the space before we get to, here's my resignation? Are we having dialogue along the way to know that we are doing this well, that we actually are working a retention plan? That's not what but are we keeping you informed and professionally developed? That will tell and will definitely affect that 19%, how quickly we are, because there may be some things that we need to do as a course correct before it gets to that point. So having that conversation, and then we can do the math on what it costs to actually professionally develop great talent versus putting that ask out for new talent to come in and getting them up to speed. When donors, who is this new person? I was talking to so-and-so. That slows down their interaction, their engagement. They're seeing less impact. It's very measurable. We are measuring it for other things and other reasons to put in those impact reports that we're sharing. the numbers are there. We've got to look at them, and we've got to let it tell the story and then respond to the story.
Okay, now this is the next big, like, get out your catcher's mitt, because there's going to be a wild pitch coming at you. Can you tell it's like almost spring and I'm thinking about baseball?
All in baseball.
Oh my God. I just heard myself and then I'm like, oh, yoy. But anyway, listen, we go with this number, the 1.8 million registered nonprofits in this country. Most are working with small budgets, super small budgets, under $1 million, majority of them. Is this something that really only a medium to large size organization can do? Or can that really, scrappy nonprofit with a small group of people, can they be doing this as well?
They can, they should, and
Okay.
some are. Absolutely, because it's we've talked about this in the past. It's that grassroots mentality. Can we start foundationally with this in mind? This is how you hire. This is built in. So it may be slow and steady. And even if it's 2 or 3 that are a part of this team, but is that baked into the DNA of the organization? So absolutely, because of what you said just moments ago, it's a mindset. And that mindset doesn't cost any more dollars to have. It costs when you don't have it. And then as the organization grows and you're putting in place, and let's face it, it's not just the salary or the medical benefits. Being able to have a place for an employee to speak out, here are my career goals. That is where this starts. Now they feel like there's a place where they can invest and they're being invested in. And that costs time. And that's nothing, but it's the time to make sure that those conversations are happening. So yes, even at that grassroots small level, absolutely.
So I appreciate that you led us through that, because I think a lot of times, on the nonprofit show, and I wouldn't just say it's us, but I mean, everything from, the larger national trade publications for our sector to thought leaders in general. Sometimes we hear things and it's like, well, yeah, that works for a national organization with 35 chapters, or, and it's kind of like, but wait, can that work for this really small, nonprofit doing the work of the angels? So I appreciate you kind of helping us to figure out, how do we level set no matter where we are within the size of our organization. I want to dig a little deeper into something else you just mentioned, embracing career growth planning. Talk to us about this, because I think for a lot of people, it's an uncomfortable conversation to have. And then to my mind, it's what leads you to looking around for other jobs, because you think, well, there's nothing left here at this organization. I can't move up. I can't make more money. I can't have more responsibility. I can't be a leader, so I got to go somewhere else. How do we get to that point where we don't have to think that way?
Well, we recognize this with our supporters. We recognize that we have to have that investment conversation. We want them to be supporters and investors of the organization. And so we are having those dialogues pretty upfront. I mean, we're listening to where their heart is. That's the same thing that we need to do with our internal client and audience. Having that upfront to say, first of all, where I'm going, making sure that the why of the individual is still aligned with the why of the organization, and how can we continue to cultivate and flourish that for you. Once an individual feels like they're being invested in, then it's less likely that they're going to look elsewhere, or even when they have that feel, now they know they've got a place, a person to come back to and have that conversation with. Hey, I was thinking, it's a place where now I can be brave and bold to say, hey, let me raise my hand. Why are we doing it this way? I was thinking this, or not even shouldn't we do more of? We kind of scratch the surface there. When we open up that conversation and allow people to know, you are worthy of investment and we want you to be great with us here. But the reality is there's so much opportunity to move on to make the overall sector better.
Yeah.
That if we want you to take something with you and know that that was a gift from us, that
Mhm.
in and of itself changes the game of
Mhm.
what it means to be professionally developed. And now I have a mindset, which our dear friend Jack Alata tells us all the time: make a plan,
Right.
make the plan. And now I feel like I can, and I have support of my organization to do that.
Yeah, I like what you said about that, because it doesn't just mean whose job are you going to take or jump leapfrog within the organization, but it's external things, certifications, career
Yes.
development, educational development. I mean, you're a CFRE, those types of things that make a difference in how you um, see the world and how professional you can be. And it helps our entire sector, right? I mean, it's just such an important thing.
Absolutely does. I mean, I was 10 years in the sector before I got my CFRE. 10 years, because there
Yeah.
up until that point, not calling any names, but I didn't have the support of an organization for not just the finances, the time, the
Yeah.
preparation for, right? To be able to do that and be successful in it. And it wasn't until the point that I had an organization and leadership that came around and said, "What do you want to do in this space? Yes, it's going to benefit us, but well beyond, we see what we see." When they opened up and actually had a document that said career development plan. Up until
Mhm.
that point, we were talking about plans for everything else, but
Right.
not for me.
I love it. I really appreciate you bringing this up, because especially it seems like it's in our DNA. At the beginning of the year, we think about these things. We set goals, we anticipate these changes. And they say it happens like with relationships and marriages, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a fresh start for so many people mentally. And so this is that time to be thinking about this, not like when you're at the depths and you're like hating your job or your life and you're feeling like you're at the dead end. Too late. You can't, it's hard to come around on that versus leaning in right now.
That's exactly it. And that speaks directly to that 19%. That's that number. And now we're tracking, right? Now we're seeing how that makes a difference. If we put this in play, if we open these conversations, if we start at ground level with you're important and we're gonna develop you and the organization together. We talk about this in strategic planning. This should be a part of that. How
Yeah.
are we developing the people? Because that plan is going to bring new and innovative things that we need to do. You need your people tracking with that. What do they need to be in that innovative space?
Right. I love that you said that. I also got to ask this question before we move on. And that is it, we talk about this silver tsunami and all of these
Mm-hmm.
leaders retiring or wanting to cut back, whatever you want to say. A lot of it has to do with founders aging out as well. I've got to believe that if some of our top leadership embraces this, it's going to make it easier for them to pass the torch and step off if they know that their organization is going to be okay. Because I talk to leaders all the time that are like, crap, I can't leave. Who's going to do it? Now some of that's real and some of that's perceived, but it's still, and we can talk about founder syndrome and all that, but I'm wondering if that could be a piece of that pie.
Oh, I believe it absolutely is. I've had some pretty candid conversations with those founders and those who have been in it for the long haul, and they're ready. They're ready to say, I to hand this over, but to who? And I've also had that very real conversation. Well, you are part of the reason why you don't have anyone to. If because
Yeah.
we again now we're in a reactive space. Life is saying it's time for you to move on. You're ready to release, but you didn't do any preparation for it. And
Yeah.
so, Julia, you hit it. Like that is a key place, but not one that's spoken out just the way you said it. And again, this is what we do here, bringing that conversation out. What's been up here, let's talk about it.
Right, right. It's such a frightening thing. It's so
Mm-hmm.
emotional, and especially if you're talking about a
A
founder
founder.
or somebody that was even like in the foundational part of an organization, or a long tenured, decades.
Longstanding board members, they're having conversations, and they're in that place of, even in their role, I want to step back. I want to roll off. I'll stay on in an advisory, but who? How are we going to do this so that we don't lose the momentum and step away from mission in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing. I love that was part of your crystal ball, topic and thinking, because it's just, I think, one of the most important factors in our sector. I mean, across all sectors, right? I mean, I was talking to somebody just this morning about their construction business, and they were lamenting that they can't find enough, laborers that are quality. And it's like, this is going across the board. This is everywhere. And so we've got to be thinking about this and talking about it. Let's talk about the other piece of your crystal ball: crafting collaboration and partners. Super hard to do because people are chasing the same money, and it's like, they don't want to steal. They don't want anyone else to steal their cheese, as they say. This involves egos. Whew. How do we get through this?
Well, first of all of those things. Let's call out the elephant in the space, right? Why? Let's go back to why are you doing what you're doing? We talk about this when an organization or when an individual comes together and says, I'm going to start a nonprofit. Do we need to? Do we need to add to that number? So that's a place to even just begin. Is there someone who's doing what you have been called, and you see this need and it's real, doing it already, and you can bring what only you bring to the table?
Right.
That's where that begins. Right. And if not, okay, let's move forward and begin anew and put in the application. But for us not to open and then just shut down, 12 months later, that's where that conversation happens, is where do I need to collaborate before I even open? And once I do, recognize you're not the only one. You will need to raise your hand and say, I do this, but I don't do this, but we need this. If at the end of the day, if it's mission, that's the priority. Mm-hmm. And so we just have to call that out. Again, you've heard me say, those that we serve are being brave to come to the table and say, I need. We've got to respond likewise, and humility to say, okay, that's what's priority. Who else? Who else can surround in this space to make sure that we're not a one-hit wonder?
Right. It's such an interesting dialogue because my personal opinion is that, in the US, we're a nation of an entrepreneurial spirit. Whether you own your own business or not, that's not the issue. It's just that this can do. I mean, de Tocqueville talked about it, more than 300 years ago, right? About how his observation was there was this really weird ethos in our country of, let's get it together and do something and solve a problem or tackle it. And so I think it's such a shock to the system for somebody new who has this vision. Maybe they've been impacted by something personal and they want to, preclude somebody else from going through it. I would say never get between a mother with a sick child and an issue, right? Because those are things that are real and happening. And yet it's a big shock when these people enter the marketplace and then they realize there are all these other things going on or that they can't get done. I'd love your opinion on this. It seems to me that collaboration is being pushed first and foremost, not by the marketplace necessarily, but more by funders.
Oh,
right. I mean, versus like people looking around saying, yeah, we already have, and this is going to sound crass, but we already have too many shelters or we have too many food banks, which in some ways I'm like, we can't have enough, but do we have enough that are well run and doing what they need to do? But it just seems to me like the big funders that I know, and when I speak with them, they're starting to, really put that down and say, we're not going to fund this if you don't come to the table with others.
Absolutely, because they want to be able to realize sustainable impact. Mm-hmm. They're in it for the long haul. like the individual donor. And when we talk about legacy giving, right, it's not about just what we're doing today. It's the fact that this is going to go beyond me. Well, the funders are saying the same thing.
Yeah.
We reckon you've sold us on, we understand, and our heart is for it. And we want to be able to be a part of the solution long term. So what needs to happen? We don't want to get to the end of a year or 2 years and, well, we can't do this any longer because we don't have enough. This was a gap. We couldn't move forward on this. Well, we'll find someone, because we're getting multiple, to your point, funders, applications for need get together. And that's happened right here in my community, where funders are saying, grantors are saying, hey, we're not going to move forward with this. There's a whole shift and change.
Right.
You guys work it out and come to the table with something that is going to give us some longevity, and the dollars are there. And you know, I love that real conversation and making us go back to the table and really go back to, why are we doing this? To make a lasting impact.
You know, Wendy, we have a major funder in our community, in our state and region, that has put out a clarion call that they will help fund, and this is my word, but consortiums or associations, so that no matter what your topic is, if it's domestic violence or animal welfare or, you know, arts and culture, if you come from a sector that doesn't have some sort of consortium association structure whereby everybody can join together for a lot of different reasons, that they will get behind funding that and funding some of those structures. And I think that's amazing, frightening for a lot of folks.
Yes.
But really interesting.
And it's keeping us sharp, Julia. We can't fall into, this is the way we've always done. And it is keeping us on our toes as the need continues to grow. Collaboration helps us to amplify our reach. The need is great. And when we can come together, you hear me say it often, be better together. That is a way to go from just making that statement to living out that mantra. This is how we can be better together, is to amplify our reach, to go further and for a longer period of time, because all of this is a marathon. None of it's a sprint.
Exactly. Well, my friend, I am better when I am with you together, for sure. I have loved this. I like I said, I'm such a fan of yours, and I think you take tough concepts, but you make this real and you make this achievable. You know, not everybody realizes this, but we broadcast live every day, and we go out onto about 22 platforms. We've had a flurry of folks that have made comments on this, especially in LinkedIn, who've really, you know, thanked you and really said, you know, Wendy, great job. You're doing great. I needed to hear this. So yeah, really super cool. Wendy F. Adams, CFRE, CEO, Cultivate for Good. But I like to say, more importantly, she's one of the co-hosts of the Nonprofit Show. And so we're very excited that we get to have her wisdom and her beautiful articulation of sometimes where we feel like, why isn't this working? But then you always seem to like bring it back and help us to understand how we can make things work. And so I so value you. You can check out Wendy at cultivateforgood.org and learn about her work and even more about her approach to the nonprofit sector. You know, we have an amazing group of people that stand alongside of us, as Wendy does, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Fundraisers Friday, Your Part-Time Controller, Third Sector Company, and Clear Impact. These are the folks that are joined at the hip with us, as I like to say. We've done more than 1,200 episodes, and we're now 5.5 years plus. And thanks to them, they are here with us. So, Wendy, you gave me so many wonderful things to think about. I'm always energized, and I feel like the possibility and the potential is real when I'm around you. Your energy is great, and shoot, we need that positive energy, right? You know, in the nonprofit sector.
Absolutely, it's a heavy lift, and we're going to do it together.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, my friend, I end each and every episode, with my mantra, and it's very special today when I think of you. And the message goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thank you, Wendy.